Hi, everybody. Well, welcome to another episode of Call Me Mr. Broadstreet. I've got some very special guests on with me today. So I'm going to go ahead and start kind of going around the circle here. First of all, we've got Meagan Pacey. Hope I got the name right. Meagan, welcome aboard. Welcome to the
Thank
show.
you. Thank you.
Next, we have Kit O'Toole. Welcome aboard for the first time on the show.
That's right. Glad to be here. Hi, everybody.
Hey. And of course, returning, Sara Schmidt. Welcome back,
Hi,
Sarah.
thanks for having me back.
No, no, sure. Well, I'm honored to have everybody on, and glad as we were kind of, talking a little bit beforehand about, different things, different little topics and everything. I figured I'd bring up kind of an interesting topic today with kind of with Beatles collection, so showing part of, what folks have, if they have it with them, but also kind of what like the future of Beatles collecting. So I might go a little bit of a reverse order with that, given that we have a panel of, if correct me if I'm wrong, I believe three of us being Gen X, one of us being millennial, and kind of we're sort of the next wave of fans, and then, going forward towards Gen Z, Gen Alpha, that type of thing. So, I know we all love collecting Beatles things and everything. I know just to kind of start a little bit, like the first generation fans will collect the 1964 stuff, 1965 with the loud horns and everything at the megaphones at the concerts, myself being more Broad Street and stuff related to when I was kind of growing up with the solo Beatles. So I wanted to pose this question to everybody, and I guess just kind of starting around, well, first with Meagan, kind of, what got you into collecting and sort of what you see the future of kind of Beatles collecting, especially since people aren't doing as much physical stuff, I don't think.
Well, let's see. Well, I was into the music since I was 12. I just slowly started collecting Beatles stuff since in my teen years, and then when I started going to college, I started to collect a couple more stuff. And then when I started going to like Beatle events or going to tribute shows, I started to collect more cool Beatle memorabilia. I also learned more about it from author Terry Crane, because if you know Terry, he will tell you everything about different Beatle memorabilia, how it started from 1964 until 1966. I mean, so I started a little bit as a teen, but then mostly in my 20s since when I started in college. I mean, getting those cool Beatle collectibles are actually neat to get. That's that's all I know. And also in the future, it would be great to see people have Beatle memorabilias in the future as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and do you think that, do you think that will be more important as the future's going on, or is it going to be what type of shape do you think it's going to take kind of going forward?
Depends on the next generation if they're a Beatle fan. Depends on the next generation.
Mhm. No, no, definitely, of course. Well, I'll go ahead, go over to Kit here, as I think we've discussed this a little bit more offline as well. But go ahead, I want to hear your thoughts about getting started with collecting and the future of collecting.
Yep. Well, I was about actually Megan's age when I started, really getting more into the Beatles. I was about like maybe 13, something like that, 13, 14. And back then, of course, I was collecting well, maybe not even collecting. I was really getting to know them, but I had Beatles stuff on cassette because, that was the thing. Then yes, they're smiling. Yeah. I mean, cassettes were the thing. And of course only the American albums were available then. And so I started there, and then, as I started getting more and more into them, um, I really, collected more like bootlegs and vinyl and, things like that. And or Dutch imports, as some call them. I would collect those. And then, then books. Then I started getting into starting to collect all kinds of different books about the band, and then some solo years. I don't know if I have any that are super, super valuable, but I just wanted to, have my own collection of books on all different topics. And then, of course, I started, as I started going to fests, I got to know some of the authors and that kind of thing. As far as original memorabilia, I don't really have a lot of that. I did treat myself a few years ago to getting one of those Beatles trays that I always wanted one of those, and I finally pulled the trigger and did it at the New Jersey Fest. And probably my biggest my personal prized possession in my collection is a poster of the artwork from Anthology One that I got like when it came out. You could all those different stores were doing promo events, and so they gave out for the first one a free poster, and years later I had it signed by Klaus Vorman. At the fest, and so I had that professionally framed and everything, and so that's one of my prized possessions. Is it worth a lot? I don't know yet, but it's a big personal favorite of mine. So I've mainly focused on the music, but I do have, a few pieces of memorabilia like that. As far as the future goes, it's going to be really interesting. I'm not going to say too much about it right now because I think we'll probably get more into it in a minute. But it's going to be interesting because, we're talking about, like with Gen Z and Gen Alpha and all, they weren't raised on physical albums like we were. And I wonder, although vinyl is making a comeback, but I just wonder if they're going to be, as you said, Ed, more as into the physical stuff as we are, because we were all raised on it. I mean, so I wonder what it's going to look like. I'll be interested to see what everybody thinks. But that's my general story.
Okay, great. Well, we'll go to Sarah, and we'll continue on to the topic. So the floor is yours.
Well, I also got into the Beatles when I was about 12. Yeah, I think I was 12. It was the late 80s. And I right away, just how I am, if I'm into something, I am like all in and I don't back down. So I just wanted to get as much Beatles stuff as I possibly could. And this isn't going to come out right, but the music wasn't my main interest. As much as I love the music, I got it on cassette, then I got it on CDs. I've never really upgraded from that. I still have my 1987 version CDs. I mean, I have a few upgrades, but not many. Like, I want the stuff, like the memorabilia and the stuff. So way early on, I used to go to the mall when they had antique shows, and I'd buy Beetle buttons and a Beetle mirror and keychains that I now found out were like knockoffs, but at the time I thought they were from the 60s, but whatever. It was fun. And then there was this store called Forever Young in the St. Louis area where I live that I would go to and buy magazines and old books. But right away, I really got interested in collecting photographs of the Beatles. Like that was really what I loved. And I would buy physical photographs of them. And here is my little Yellow Submarine photo album, my vintage 1968. And I have some of the pictures I've collected over the years. So this is like my main thing I collect are these photographs of the Beatles. I absolutely love them. And so that's why I started Meet the Beatles for Real, because I like photos taken by the fans. And it's interesting when I think about the future, because I don't know how many people actually collect the physical photos anymore. And it's all about the digital. And I mean, I scan every photo I own, and I'm happy to share them with people, and they share photos with me. And I have all these flash drives and Google Drives full of Beatles photos that fans have shared with me, and I've shared with other people. But I wonder if the days of the originals are, if they're not going to be, I hope they're not as collectible anymore. So then the price will go down and then I can get more. So, hey, that's my hope. Yeah, people don't want the originals, so then I can get. But I am wondering about that. Is that going to, right now I don't see it, but it could be in the future. I don't know.
Yeah, that's I think that was kind of why, bringing up this topic, especially kind of closer to sort of our, very general age group as well. I mean, I'll share a bit about my story as well. Of course, yeah, being seeing Paul McCartney, July 4th, 1990, first rock concert, age of 14. So yes, that drove me into the same rabbit hole where I became from more of a casual fan to fanatic, and that was it. And it is kind of interesting, especially more how they market things now with, I mean, we all have our physical media. I certainly love my physical media, but sort of, even the way the marketing's kind of evolving a bit with more digital with more things on streaming services and everything on that. So just kind of a free for all. Yeah, some thoughts about that, some conversation about that, kind of opening it up to everybody.
Well, something that Sara just said really triggered about, physical photos, that, you see, and I'm sure Sara, you've seen, well, all of us have seen these. There'll be like, I don't know, Pinterest sites and blogs and all, what kind of like yours, although not as good, that will collect will collect all different, photos, rare photos, and so forth, and present them on the web. And in a way, maybe that's kind of like their collection, but as you said, Sara, it's not physical, I mean, and you can get photos now and from, different areas on the web. I mean, it's as easy to do as just, download it from Google Photos or something and put it on your website. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting to think that, I wonder if in the future, if people will be, like you are, Sara, collecting physical copies of the photos. Like, is it as important to younger generations? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I collect a lot of paper.
Hmm.
I have probably the largest collection of Beatles Independent Fan Club newsletters because I have binders and binders and binders and binders upon binders of them. And I wonder if that is still of interest or but the things deteriorate. I mean, some of them aren't in that great of shape, and I've been very careful to scan them to try to preserve them. So that's another aspect of it too. And we're talking about things that are over 50 years old, that they're not meant to last. Some of the paper stuff just isn't meant to last forever.
Right.
So
Well, yeah.
preserving it is probably the best way to go. But I don't know. Will anyone even think like, wait, this was an actual piece of paper at one time?
Yeah.
Like, will that even be a connection that people will make in the future?
That is, yeah, that's definitely interesting. Megan, do you have some thoughts kind of on that?
Actually, yeah. Kit said something about collecting books. Well, that is true because I was gonna say the same thing, Kit. I also started to collect Beatle books too, and I'll tell you that story. It all started when we had our first Beatles on the Beach Festival in 2019 in Florida. The first Beatle author I got to meet is Terry Crane, and he was selling a book about Beatles merchandise on the NEMS. And he was the first author I got to know, and along with him was Susan Shumsky on the Maharishi. And then I started to get involved with the meeting different authors at different Beatle events here at Beatles on the Beach, and also mostly at Fest for Beatles fans, dependent in Metro New York, and of course in Chicago. And Nicole Michael from the 910 Public Relation, she said to me, "Hey Megan, I want you to interview some of the great Beatle authors on your show." And I really liked the idea, and then I decided to interview every Beatle author. So the first Beatle author was Terry Crane. And after him, we got Susan Shumsky to come on, and I would have her talk about how the Beatles were influenced on the Indian culture, especially George. Next one was Jude Sutherland Kessler, and she's great. Of course, having Kit on was great. Of course, having you, Sara, on the show one time was great too. So I keep going to find which authors comes out with any books. Like right now, there's a new book out by Ian Leslie on Lennon McCartney on their songs. Bill Lash just came out with a book about Beatles biographic. I mean, there's a lot of them out there, a lot of great new Beatle books out there. And then when there's Beatles on the Beach coming, I would tell Daniel there's a couple of authors would be great. Like we had Terry Crane there, we had Susan Shumsky a couple of times there. Besides them, we had Charles Rosenay on his Beatle top 10 Beatle list books. Besides Charles, we had Mike and Bernie Byrne at the event talking about the book they came out about 3 years ago on the Beatles story exhibit, the one in Liverpool. And they're a very lovely couple. We had Dana Klausner on the Beatlemania Lives On. And also we have Paul Ferrante on 30 Minutes in Memphis. So I keep working on getting authors on the show or invite them to come to Florida too.
And
Yeah.
and first of all, thank you, Megan, for all of your support, for us authors, because really, we need the exposure, right, Sarah? I mean, that's
Definitely.
we need that.
Definitely. I'm terrible at promoting.
So I really, appreciate your dedication to that. But that's, something you said, Megan, also made me think, that's been a really interesting development in fairly recent years in Beatles fandom, is that much as we talk about the physical, maybe the physical product isn't going to be as crucial to future collectors, but there are more books now than ever. I mean, and it's great because they're covering all different areas
Right.
of fandom. I mean, whether it's collecting, whether it's the fan clubs, or yep, or things like that. It's really been a great development, I think, in recent years, that all of these sort of what may have been considered, quotes, nooks and crannies of Beatles fandom, are now being fully told. I think we're all kind of contributing in our own way to keeping the Beatles story alive and uncovering previously unknown or underreported
Right.
things, right?
That's right. Well, here's something else, Kit. The other authors I interviewed that has great connections to the Beatles, like the author I interviewed who told me he wrote a book that was an untold story, is Jay Bergen, and his
Yeah.
book talks about how John Lennon was fighting against that Morris Levy guy on the bootlegs, and that's one. Another author I met or interviewed just recently, he wrote a book, it's just photographs, and that's Paul Saltzman, and he tells the story about how he met the Beatles while visiting in India after the broke up with his girlfriend. That's number two. Let's see who else. Another guy we all know who works with Ringo, and he talks about Ringo's drums and different outfits. Gary Astrid. So these are the people that has some great connections to the Beatles. So when I interview anybody, I would tell them in one of those chapters on one of the histories, and there you go. There you go.
Yep.
One thing that kind of goes with this, with the books, that I find, and I don't know if this is for everybody or if it's just me, but the ebook that I have out doesn't sell very well. People want the physical copy of the book. And people have
I
told me
agree.
that. Now I'm like, it's available as an ebook. They're like, well, that's nice, but I'd rather have the physical copy. Which is very interesting because that goes against everything that we hear right now, that people don't want physical books, they want ebooks. But I think Beatle fans are a whole different group, because I know I want the physical copy of a book because I don't know if my Kindle app is going to be around for eternity. And I want to research the Beatles probably for the rest of my life, probably when I need my books. So if I have something just as an ebook, who's to say in 20 years from now, will I still be able to access that book? But hard copy's not going anywhere.
Yeah, and I do have some ebooks, but I
Oh, I
do
do
tend to
too.
but I do tend to prefer the hard copies. And again, it may be partially because of, how we came up that, that was physical books, but there's just something about holding the physical copy and the
But even the younger
pictures.
fans that I talk to, when I mention that there's that, they're like, no, I want I want like the actual copy of the book.
Yep. So that's a great thing to see, that, now again, future generations, I don't know, but current, current ones, yeah, I think you're right, Sarah, that the physical copy is still important. And Megan, I saw you nodding. Yeah. I mean, I think, that physical media still has, it has a place right now. Now, 20 years from now, I don't know. But
Now, some people like to buy both
yeah.
because they want to keep their physical copy nice and like collectible,
Yep.
but then they want like to read the copy and
That's
highlight it. And like, I have my Kindle that I got for Christmas right here. I use it to highlight, but it's mostly stuff I'm not gonna look at again.
I,
Usually
I
word
I don't know
connections.
who would do that. Who would want to buy a physical copy to seal and then to have? I can't think of anybody.
Yeah, who would have multiple copies of the same movie that they don't ever open?
Mhm.
Who would that
I have
person be?
no idea. No, this is all very good points that you're all bringing up. And I mean, especially I'll even tell a little as I happen to have some time off during this week. The last work day, I went into town, Copley Public Library in Boston. I was researching Broad Street articles, and I wanted to print off a microfilm if we're going really old school from the actual
Mhm.
newspaper itself. But yeah, kind of preservation, like like again, Megan, you brought up a good point about with the authors and everything. Do you feel like it's also a form of preservation when you're kind of all interviewing different authors or getting their take in the moment on their own work?
Well, oh, Megan, sorry.
Yeah, or
I don't.
anybody, but
I'm
yeah,
not.
if you,
No, go ahead, Kit. Go
No,
ahead.
no. I was just going to say, I think preservation is, part of what we're doing. I think it is about preserving the Beatles story and like what Megan does
Mhm.
in interviewing us. I think, I hadn't really thought of it that way, but I guess that's true because we've become part of the story too. And so I think, having us on record talking about our research, what we found is a, very beneficial thing.
Right.
Hmm.
And I think like she talked to Jay Bergen to have him tell his story and have that preserved with the audio is just like an added bonus to his written word. You could have it all kind of bundled together if you were in the future wanting to research about that court case.
Yes,
There's many different
exactly.
forms that you could go to find out about that.
Yeah.
Right. You're absolutely right, Sarah. Let's see. And besides Jay, there's other ones that would also talk about Beatles. Elliot Mintz, another author who has a book out about him and his relationship with John and Yoko. It's called it's called We All Shine On, Me, John and Yoko. That just came out recently, and I just read it, and I thought it's an interesting book. And I hope to interview Elliot someday along the line. So we'll see. And let's see, another new book came out I mentioned is Ian Leslie, and he just came out with a book about Lennon and McCartney on their songs. And besides him, another book is out is by David Shep on Yoko, and he has stories about his moments with John and Yoko as well. That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. I mean, it's just amazing, that more and more information comes out every day. And thank goodness that they're preserving. I mean, I was thinking of like Ivor Davis. I mean, he wrote that
Oh,
great book, I think it was The Beatles and Me on Tour.
yeah.
And, one of the most I thought fascinating parts of that book was when he talked about, being in the crowd during the shows. Because sure, we've seen the archival footage, we've seen Shea
Yeah.
Stadium, we've seen all that. But to have somebody there saying it got scary, I mean, he said, yeah, it was fun and you saw people screaming and all. But I mean, he said it was amazing that people weren't killed. I mean, and he really captured the insanity of like, being in the hurricane of Beatlemania at its height. And thank goodness he got that all in writing and talks about it in interviews because,
Right. And Ivor's such a good storyteller.
he is. He's
And you got to get
wonderful.
Ivor on. I gotta, I
I
gotta
have to
I
work
did.
on that.
get that because he is so good to talk to.
Sweetheart.
Oh, he's such a great guy. But just the way he tells the stories about the Beatles, you're just like you're on the edge of your seat. He's so good at telling his stories.
You're absolutely right, Sarah. I have interviewed Ivor twice on my show, and he's a really cool guy too. He's like a journalist who traveled with the Beatles, and he told me those whole stories behind how he was with the Beatles. He'll tell you about the Hollywood Bowl, and he'll tell you about. Here's a funny story. He told me a story how he saw the fans throwing jelly beans at the Beatles, and he even got hit in the head by those jelly beans. You even see some marks on it. That's what he told me, and he'll tell you a story how he was at the Beatles when they met Elvis back in
Yeah,
1965.
yeah.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
he wrote a wonderful book. I mean, it's not a wonderful topic, but the book was very good about Charles Manson because he
Ooh.
he was there. I mean, he
Yeah.
was the court case, and he was had met quite a members of the family, and it just that book's very, very well read, very good read.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And another book I really enjoyed, I had it since 2013, and this was the time when we started to celebrate the Beatles' 50th anniversary. The book I had, well, this book I had is written by Spencer Lee, and it's called Beatles in America. And then when I was going through the pictures and reading it, it looks very interesting. Shows different places the Beatles were going. Shows different artists from the British invasion. It shows different Beatle memorabilia and all that neat stuff on the Fab Four. It's a really good book, and I also had a pleasure interviewing Spencer one time as well.
Mm.
Yep.
Thank you. No,
So,
thank you.
Megan, do you ever think of getting all your interviews together in like one place so people can listen?
Actually,
Good
well, to tell you
idea.
the truth, here's what I do. When I get guests on the show, depends on if they're available. Like first I tell them what time they could call in. They can come on for 15 or 20-minute interview. And then I would have someone come on after this first one. I get like sometimes I get two guests or sometimes three guests, and most times I would get four guests. So three or four guests that would come on. Sometimes they call in, or most sometimes they come on Zoom, depends on what country they're from. That's it.
Wow. No, thank you. Thank you. And especially Ivor Davis, thank you. I'm gonna have to somehow hopefully reach out to him and if he'll come on. That's
Oh,
awesome.
I'll try to hook you up.
Well, thank you, thank you. And here's the thing: we're always still learning too. I mean, there's things just when you think you've understood everything, or supposedly something new comes up, appropriate to the topic we're discussing. And here's another one I thought of. This is also an unscripted that we're doing for today's show. The one that Megan, when you mentioned Elliot Mintz, I hadn't even thought about it till it popped into my head. The Lost Lennon tapes. I think another good
Oh
resource.
yeah. Yeah, I heard about it. I have a DVD or something somewhere along the line. Well, it's one of those bootleg DVDs. So yeah, there are some lost tapes that he interviewed John. I mean, there's a lot of interesting stuff Elliot tells about from his book. There are some good times and sometimes there are some rough times with John because John could be okay, but sometimes John was a rough person to hang out, you know?
Yeah.
That
It was
is true.
complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I have a Dutch import or two of the Lost Linen tapes.
Me too. But I remember when they first aired, and I mean, being with my stereo, and I would wait to hit the record button, waiting to record the episodes. I mean, that was fun. That was a lot. Well, that and Ubu Jubu. When that aired, I would get up and hit the record button.
We didn't get Ubu Jubu in St. Louis.
Oh no!
So when I would go to the fest in Chicago, I would like get all excited because I could get to listen to it over that weekend. Like that was one of the main perks of going to the fest during that time was, oh, I get to hear Ubu Jubu because it's not like I could be like, hey Kit, record that for me and send me
The MP3.
send me the MP3 of it.
Well, and for me, with the Lost Land tapes, when I would listen to them in real time, well, God, way back when, they would always be on least in the area I was living in at the time, in the Northern Virginia, D.C. area, and I'm assuming on the East Coast. Always be on a Sunday night, so it'd be before school, So like I'm listening to it 10 or 11 at night, or trying to, and then having to go to sleep, get up for school the next day, as
Yeah,
opposed
I
to
think you're right.
how
They
we
were
consume
on
the
like really
media.
late. I didn't always get to hear it. Like depending on what was going on, if I fell asleep. Like I do remember that now you mention it.
And that's the other thing, Beatles memories. I mean, Beatles, how, and also I guess it leads me down another interesting path with, how the story, how we're, in our own way, from our own corners, our own interactions, trying to preserve the story, but preserving the accuracy of the story. I wanted to kind of speak to a little bit about that, how either easy or more complicated it is in the digital era to kind of preserve that. Free for all, whoever wants to chime in on that one.
Oh boy,
Mm.
this is a
Yeah,
big topic.
that is a big
I
topic.
don't know. It's hard for me to know. Hard for me to know. I don't know.
Because in many ways, social media and the internet in general is a great thing. I mean, it's a great thing for research and so forth, but it also has its downfalls, and particularly when it comes to misinformation. I'm sure we've all seen it on Facebook, the John Lennon quotes that, he never said. The the one just came up like the other day, the pictures of supposedly James McCartney's wedding, and that Bruce Springsteen played there, and and the pictures were obviously fake. I mean, they were
That was
obvious.
not. I've met James
I thought that
McCartney.
too. I thought it was
I,
real.
I
But
waited in line next to James McCartney in the for the bathroom. I know what he looks like. That was not him.
exactly. But that's the thing. I mean, AI is, and I'm not one of these people that says, "Oh, all AI is horrible," but I mean, it's getting better and better at faking things like that and making them look, pretty real. And this is going to be a bigger and bigger problem. And I guess it's up to us authors, broadcasters, to help keep the story straight, because this is just going to get worse and worse.
Did you see, it's probably 10 years ago now, someone made this YouTube video about Beatles 100 years from now. I think it was for like the 50th anniversary. And it was like somebody doing a documentary 100 years from now. And it was like when Scottie Pippen joined the Beatles. And it was like all this stuff from like the 20th century all mixed in together. And like when the Beatles got into hip hop, it really played. I was like, no, this is what's going to happen. It's going to be like all mixed up and wrong.
Crazy.
It was very funny. It was a very funny sketch, but it's kind of scary.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
Because of course, I mean, and I mean, I'm not against like parodies and stuff like that, but there's, the danger of that people could really believe that. And
that was like the whole point of the sketch. The comedy thing was like, this could happen.
Yeah.
And we're not going to be there to say, wait a minute, none of that happened.
Yep.
The movie Idiocracy at the end of that film, where they're going through, if you haven't seen it, with that. But Megan, I noticed you looked like you had a John Lennon collectible you were going to go show us.
Oh yeah. Well, since we're talking about memorabilia, I like to share a couple of other memorabilia. Besides books, I do collect other cool Beatles stuff. So here's my John Lennon bobblehead, and I had it for a couple of years.
Cool.
John will always agree with you.
Yeah.
Are the Beatles the best? John.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, this isn't from like in the 60s or 70s. This is like kind of a newer bobblehead version. So this is the John Lennon that I found online a couple years ago, and this is almost like the picture that Bob Gruen took back in the mid 70s, I believe, when he was with May Pang. So yeah, and this was the time when John Lennon was still living in New York back in the 70s until we lost him back then. So yeah, that's my John Lennon one, and behind me is my Beatle dolls right here.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
I see them.
Love those dolls.
Yeah.
All the figures and all that cool stuff. So what you're seeing is in my music room. So
very nice. That's very nice. Well, so also just want to see if other folks had either any other items. Okay, you're outside, so I'm not sure you may have any.
Yeah, I talked about the two prizes in my collection. So
well, let me show some of my cool fan club stuff. I just grabbed a couple things.
Great.
So let me get them out of these little
stuff too.
I have these two patches. Life member of the Beatles fan club. I have George and I have Paul. I'm looking for John and Ringo, if anyone has a John and Ringo that say life member of the Beatles fan club. So I have these two, which I think they're cool because now I'm a lifetime member of the Beatles fan club because I have the patches, right? And then I have these pendants, which
there we go.
Which they're stitched on. Most of them are like not stitched. These are like hand stitched. And it says their official fan club on the back.
Cool.
And then this isn't the other one.
Oh, I think I've seen pictures of that, but I've never seen one in person. That's very cool.
Oh, it's really cool. But this one, it must be from Spain.
Whoa.
Wow.
So those are some of my treasures.
Very cool.
But I collect lots of stuff from fan clubs, pictures of the Beatles, but lots of fan club stuff. I don't know why I got into that, but I did.
Well, and it's interesting because this is, fan studies are really becoming a big area of study now. Which I think is high time. I mean,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
obviously the fans played a big part in the
Well,
Beatles'
obviously, yeah.
popularity.
But not for us. They still wouldn't be. I mean, they're still fans are still important.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so you were kind of ahead of the curve
I
years
was
ago.
ahead of the
Yeah.
curve.
So there you go.
It's all about that. Yeah, no, it's all about the preservation, everything like that. Of course, the collections, the way we connect with everything, and Megan, go for it.
Okay, well, here's one I got at Fest for Beatles Fans last March in Jersey City. Me and my dad found it. This is like a little money bag of a Beatle.
Oh,
Never
cute.
seen this before.
That's cute.
I know. Yeah, so that's one. Let's see what else. I got so many. I mean, some right here and some at home at my other house. And these are Beatle pens right here. I mean, it was hard to get everyone out. Like, here's a big one called "I'm official Beatle fan."
Yep.
Oh,
Actually,
it's official. You're official Beatles fan.
That's right.
and it
Got
was
the
given to
button.
me by one of my friends. This one is yeah, some of the cool pens I even get from friends or I get it from different Beatle events. So these are a lot of Beatle pens. And let's see what else. And also here's a picture I got autographed of Frida Kelly.
Yep.
Got it
Yeah.
at in Chicago last year. Really very sweet woman. I wish to interview her someday, but
You and me both, hon.
oh really? Okay.
I've wanted to interview her for ever, and she just basically said she said her piece in her movie, and that's
Yeah,
that.
let's see. And then I got some Beetle like little pens. Here's one right here.
Oh, I have that. I think, yeah, I have something like that.
Oh,
Yeah,
cool.
that's one of them. And this one, this is a Beetle wrapper from an ice cream back in the 60s.
Oh yeah, I've seen pictures of that. Wow. So again, I'm seeing one in the wild. This is great.
That's right. And yes, and also and of course I got passes from different Beatle events. Like here's one from Beatles on the Beach Festival right here. And and sometimes I get one from Abbey Road on the River because I always promote Abbey Road on the River as well. Let's see. There's a lot of them I have. I mean, there's a lot I have with Beatles stuff. So there
So
you
that
go.
makes me wonder, what's the future of Beatle fan conventions going to look like?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
In my
Chicago.
mind,
Well, let's see. I don't know. I mean, it's gonna be the same thing like we did before. I mean, we meet, we greet, meet the fans, meet everybody, make new friends. I remember you go to the main stage where I just remember in New Jersey, Tom Frangione and Mark Lapidus will welcome everybody, but in Chicago, I think Terry,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry
along with her,
Hemmer.
yep,
We love
she's gonna
her.
Yep, she's going to welcome everyone. And of course, Susan Ryan will meet the authors. Terry will do meet the guests. And of course, when you're there, you'll meet the authors in that room with with that gift shop there selling t-shirts, books, you name it. And then also you'll get to meet some guests at one of the tables to get autographs signed or get a picture taken with. So that's
Yeah.
so it is what it is. You know, that's what Fester Beatles fans does. And when I was at Abbey Road on the River, they have some cool merchandise too, as well, especially the t-shirts, of course. And they have different other vendors that you can find as well too. There's one that sells cool memorabilia. There's one side at well, this the other one that has, I don't know, it's like a small bus that you go in there and they sell records and stuff. And I actually bought an old Beetle canvas, but I'll take a picture of it and show you guys maybe later on. Or yeah, so that's one. All right, Beatles on the beach. Let's see what vendors they got. Well, of course, selling t-shirts. or meeting authors, of course, and of course, there's a Beatles pinball machine you can play on. Let's see. And also if you ever go to that room, it's the Art Carnell Museum next to the main stage. You go inside and then you can see some of the Ringo art that Neil Glacier was showing everybody. So that's it. So yeah.
But what's interesting about thinking about the future is I think the majority of us who have been to fest, particularly back in like the 90s and maybe early 2000s and all, is there wasn't social media then.
Right. Right.
So you sort of depended on these conventions to connect with people that way. There was obviously no YouTube. And so, I mean, I remember sitting in the video rooms, they had 2 video rooms
Yeah.
set up, remember that?
Yeah.
And, you'd see like some of the footage of like George Harrison being interviewed in Japan, and it'd just be like, wow.
Oh yeah, that was that live concert he did back in the 90s, I believe.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah,
And yeah, there
yeah.
was no other place to see that
Okay.
footage unless, well, you could probably get a Dutch import of that. But I mean but the majority of the time, yeah, you would go to these conventions to connect with people, to see the rare footage, buy merchandise, as Megan was talking about. Well, technology has changed a lot of this. I mean, I still prefer to connect with people in person, but you can communicate with people all year round. Videos, just hit up YouTube at 2 a.m. and you'll see footage that you wouldn't believe. And then with vendors, of course, there's eBay, there's Discogs and sites like that where they can sell stuff, and other outlets. So it's definitely changed over time. And technology is a big part of that. So yeah, it's interesting to think, what are the future of these conventions now. In the case of like Abbey Road on the River, as Megan was mentioning, they have a kind of a niche because it's a lot of live music. So
Right.
so I think some conventions may have to pivot to things like that to still encourage attendance, or even incorporate like cosplay and stuff that younger people. God, I'm sounding like my parents. These young people are are into. But I mean, things like that to it's going to be a different kind of experience, I think, than what we all had when we first started attending these conventions.
And I see more and more of the academic, they're not conventions, symposiums. That's
Yes.
the fancy word that we use these days.
Yep.
Like those things pop up.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, there's one coming up in November, the Ken
Right.
Womack's, although his are more kind of a bridge between, it's kind of a cross between a fan fest and academic conference.
Which that might be the new route.
Exactly. Yeah,
I
it's
don't
going to be
know,
really
but
interesting.
yeah, I am interested to see how that goes.
Yeah,
Well, there's
absolutely.
even another thought I have, as everybody's kind of I'm glad to have all these thoughts, and that's obviously why we're doing this. Even the type of memorabilia collected. Again, I mean, it seems like, at least my observation was, with now the Beatles' 10th anniversary stuff seeming to be a little bit more valued, and maybe
Mhm.
some of the more solo memorabilia kind of becoming more valuable as time is going on. Stuff from the 70s, the 80s, even down to the 90s, as we're going on. So that's all very interesting points that you're all bringing up.
Yeah, it's well, and I mean, there's even now some, anthology, nostalgia and all that. I'm just like, oh my God, it wasn't that long ago, was it?
It was though.
It
Yeah.
was, I know.
Hard to believe.
I mean, what,
Yeah,
30
well,
years? I mean, I
30
just like,
years. It's going to be 30 years when the anthology got released, November of
mhm,
I remember when it
1990.
was the 30th anniversary of the Beatles coming to America.
yep,
I
exactly.
remember when we were celebrating that.
Doc, this is heavy, Doc.
Yeah.
Really? Like, no, it can't be, not the anthology.
Well, speaking of solo memorabilia, like, it looks like you've got some stuff that's popping up that you're. Go ahead and share, please.
Okay, well, I like to share a couple of the Beatle 45s that I found. Some I found at one of those events, and some that were given to me by a friend of mine who's a Beatle tribute singer, and he wants me to have it. So I'll share some of you. This one I just found online. This is the 45 Junior's Farm, or Sally G, right here.
My
And
favorite.
I bought it because I was trying to get an autograph signed to Jeff Britton if I ever get a chance to meet him someday. And
I was fortunate enough to go to Junior's farm and meet Jeff Britton and got him to sign my Wingspan book.
Cool.
yeah, and also another good news, I'll be interviewing Jeff next week, so that
Oh,
should
he's
be exciting.
really
Yep,
nice.
yep, should be great. So that's Jeff. Besides that, this one I got at Beatles on the Beach Festival. Bought it from a guy named Tom Prestopnik. He's like a roadie with the the Beatle tribute band I know called McCartney Mania, and he likes to collect stuff. So this is original 45 Ballad of John and Yoko right here, or Ode Brown Shoe. This was from 1969. And then we got some stuff that's you never seen before. Like here's one. Don't tell Sally I remember you, or
Wow.
or talking about you, shimmy shake. Lend me your cone, your feet's too big. And let's see. I got some lot of cool collections I kept. So there you go. I
Yeah.
got a lot of 45s I just kept. Oh, and
Mhm.
here's this one that is neat.
Oh, picture discs.
Yeah, those are
Yes.
fun.
Yeah, that's another one that's neat too.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
yeah,
When you, Megan, when you were just showing the 45s of like the Hamburg stuff, yeah, one of the first bootlegs I ever got was I remember at a street fair in Glenview, Illinois, and they had they were the Decca tapes, but it was a cassette of them, and I just saw Beatles on there, so I was like, because this was like 85, somewhere around there, 85, 86. So like, oh, Beatles, I haven't seen this before. And then when I played it, I was just like, oh my God, and I thought I had found some unbelievably rare thing. I
You
mean,
got like the hidden tapes.
yeah, I was like, I found some hidden tapes. What is they? Oh, and then of course, then I learned
Yeah, I
about
couldn't find
Hamburg.
out a lot of people had them, but
Yeah,
not
but
that many people. They're still pretty rare.
yeah,
The same. Oh my God. Yeah.
but I was
You
Well,
were
yeah.
like
so
gonna
Funny.
call up
excited.
Sotheby's or something and be like, I got
Like, I've got these super rare tapes. Listen to this. Like, oh yeah, those are the Hamburg tapes, Star Club tapes.
somebody taped off a vinyl.
Yeah,
We've
exactly.
we've
But I
got the
was,
tapes.
yeah, we got the tapes.
Got the tapes.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yep, that's right. But oh, I was so
Well,
excited.
that was part of the experience too, and I don't get to talk enough about it. But not that I can technically encourage Dutch imports, wink, wink, but people know where to
Mhm.
find them. I mean, I remember things like going off topic a little bit, like Yellow Dog Records, Orange
Yes.
Records, things like that. Stuff that it doesn't exist, but it does.
Mhm.
And with folks
Bigatone was my favorite.
yeah,
Mhm.
Vigatone, and I mean
My
just
handle on some chat group was Bigatone Girl.
Ha!
That was like my favorite
I like
label,
that.
and I
and
would
that's
chat in chat
yeah.
rooms with fellow Dutch import collectors.
Mhm.
And I was almost always the only female too.
Yeah, yeah. So no, that's
They were
sad.
surprised that a girl knew about these rare tapes. Like,
Early
Yeah,
days of
I'm
the
not.
internet. I
I didn't
know.
know a girl would know about this stuff.
Sadly, I'm not surprised. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
we could all tell
I mean, that was
stories.
like
Uh,
1996. Like, yeah.
the other ones I remember discovering before, they started finally being released officially was, the BBC sessions.
Oh
And I
yeah.
have some crappy recordings of that I think people just recorded off the radio or something, and then, and then issued it. Yeah, terrible. But, that was before,
Well,
Beatles
that
at the
Great Dane
BBC.
cut came out.
Yeah.
Right before, that just was like, oh my gosh. But
Yep.
then the real thing came out and it blew me away.
Exactly. And I mean, and the sound was like, of course, a ton better. And yeah, I mean that was crazy.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah, I remember
discovered I
Beatles at
was
the
singing
Beat.
some of the songs incorrectly because the tape was so bad.
Exactly. Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's really what they're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's the other thing. We all made that mistake with, with tapes, with CDs, or even as we discussed earlier, sort of misinformation passed down. Now the other way, where you didn't have something to really check it, unless you were in academic circles, where people are saying, "Oh yeah," like the famous one. I think we would all hear even way before this current social media age, that somehow Linda Eastman was related to the Eastman Kodak fortune, which
Yeah.
Which is
no,
not true.
no,
Not true.
not correct.
But if you didn't know, it made
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah, Eastman,
And
like,
she
oh,
does camera stuff. She just takes,
yeah.
she's always with the camera and the photos. And I
Yep.
mean, when someone said that, I believed it. I was like, oh,
Yeah,
okay,
my early years, same thing. I thought, like, yeah, makes sense,
right. I mean, and then when you find out that wasn't true, you're like, oh, well, I heard it was. I mean, but there was nowhere to go and like double check. There weren't that many books that would talk about
It's a
Linda in
double-edged sword.
detail.
It
Mhm.
is. It really is a double-edged sword. And then, well, also that as another thing I'm thinking of, kind of as we're getting sort of closer to the closer of this particular episode, but as I'm thinking about now, how has it sort of changed the way that you've collected? So, in other words, we're talking about the future of collecting, the past of collecting. In other words, an example would be something like, pre-internet, of course. You had to really scrounge and find the stuff and everything. Whereas now, everything's online, everything's available, stuff pops up that I don't even know that exists, and now it's suddenly I have to have it. I don't know if that makes sense, but
It makes sense. It makes sense. Yeah. You
True.
know what I find these days I do is that I'm not just looking for collectibles for me, but I'm looking for things for my Beatle friends. Like, oh yeah, I know so and so would like this, so like I'm not just looking out for myself, I'm looking out for everybody.
Yep. But and this is again kind of the double-edged sword of the internet, because on the one hand, yeah, you can, find more things, but you have to kind of research it to make sure it's authentic. If it's something that costs a bit of money, because there are fakes. I've seen, pictures of I belong to one Beatles collecting group on Facebook, and there's always somebody posting what is supposed to be, an autographed
Oh.
Beatle, copy of Beatles album, or a Paul autograph or something, and it's fake, and I feel terrible for them
That
that
is true. That
yeah.
is true. It would be signed by someone else. Like if anyone remembers good old Frida,
Mhm.
she
Yep.
would sign autographs for them.
Right.
Sure.
Exactly. And understandable. I mean, they couldn't sign everything. And
Right.
so, you've got to do a little research on your own, and not only of the item itself, but the seller, and to make sure
Mhm.
that you're getting what you're paying for,
Right. Especially
so
if it's an autograph.
yeah, exactly.
Like
Autographs
especially
are
something
tough,
big ticket like that.
and again, they're getting easier and easier to fake.
They are.
yeah, that's the thing. I know it's a whole universe. It's all good, bad, everything in indifferent, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, I guess mostly good though. Mostly good that first we all got these connections. We could all connect in persons. We all did, get to at the fest. Some that I got to see before, some that I got to meet for the first time in person. So kind of as we're going around, I think as we're sort of wrapping up, I think we'll go ahead and do a couple plugs for things, as this will be pretty much the last weekend of June that this is airing. But any upcoming events or anything that you want to plug as far as your sites and everything, Megan, we'll start with you.
Okay, well, to check me out with my podcast, go to the www.thehistoryofrockandroll.net. It's called The History of Rock and Roll, all music from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s to check out. And this week's podcast, it's going to be a Beatles show, and we got four amazing guests. Our first one is Jeff Britton, who's the drummer for Wings. Number two, we are welcoming the guy who owns Octopus's Garden fanzine. That's Tom Argier. Besides him, we got Ohan Lin on George Harrison's new book, the new book on George Harrison's from the 1970s, and Bill Lass on the Beatles videography. So that's the show I'll be doing for next week. So I hope everyone tunes in and check out what my other upcoming shows I'll be doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Good.
Hey, boy, that's a great show. I'm gonna I can't wait to
Oh,
tune in. That's quite a lineup. That's awesome. You can find out more about me at kiddotool.com. I'm also on Facebook under Kiddo Tools Keynotes. You can join and see what I'm up to. Recently dropped a new episode of Talk More Talk, where we talked about, I think it was the Venus and Mars episode. And we talked about the anniversary of that. More of course are coming. Toppermost the Poppermost, you can find us toppermostthepoppermost.net. We're dropping new episodes like crazy. We're into April 1965 now on the charts, and so we've got some great interviews coming up, so go to our site, take a listen, let us know what you think. As far as I go, I'm going to be teaching a new course in the fall, and I think the announcement will be up very soon. So just, check out my socials, where I'm going to be teaching a course on disco, history of disco. It's going to be a lot of fun. So part one's in September, part two's in December. And then Kim Womack and I just started a new, kind of show, kind of half show, half class, called Classic for a Reason, where we talk about, we talk about different albums of what makes them classics, and we may disagree on some of them. The next one we're doing, by pure coincidence, is Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys, and this was planned months in advance, so now it takes on new meaning. And so that will be August 19th, and I've got links to all this, and I'll send you links to it. And that's all on my website, my socials. So I'm everywhere. You can't get away from me.
Thank you, Kit. No, much appreciated. And go ahead, Sarah, please.
I'm not as well wanted as a kid, but that's
Not
okay.
true.
You
Not
can
true.
always go to Meet the Beatles for Real, all one big long word, meetthebeatlesforreal.com. I update my site daily and kind of digging in right now to the Beatles 1965 European tour and seeing what was going on with the fans and the Beatles during that tour. Check out my book, Dear Beatle People, the story of the Beatles North American fan clubs. It's available on Amazon, paperback, hardback, and an ebook. It's there if you want it. And that's really all I got. I'll be at the fest in Chicago. I don't know if I'm selling a book, probably not. I'm just gonna hang out, but I'll be there. So come say
Cool.
hi.
Well, thank you. No, thank you all. First one, I was there. First of all, everybody is wanted. That's the important thing to always take away from this, and I really I value everybody. Thank you all for being on here. I appreciate the perspectives, and of course, kind of with just with everybody's knowledge and everything and what we contribute to the Beatles community. So gonna go ahead and wrap this up. So again, just wanted to go ahead and thanks very much again to Meagan Pease, Kiddo Tool, and Sara Schmidt. This is Call Me Mr. Broadstreet, and I will see everybody in the next episode. Take care, everybody.